heavens will not release certain things if I'm not in position. All right, so my position, your position, our place, I'll be using place and position interchangeably. All right, your position would determine what begins to flow in your direction. All right, and then let's continue verse 6. But water would come out of the ground and water the entire surface of the land. Then the Lord formed the man out of the dust of the ground and breathed the breath of life into his nostrils, and man became a living being. The Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and he placed the man he had formed. All right, so here again I see God, the leader, coming in, making provision before he placed the man. So what that teaches me and should also begin to instruct you is that God is already made provision for you to come into. All right, there's a place he expects you to function. Remember, he didn't release the rains. He didn't cause the ground to release their shrubs because there was no man to work it. All right, so now work is an expression of man. All right, we are not defined by the job we have or don't have. Why? Because the environment needs us. Your being around will begin to determine what the assignment is. So here is creation waiting for you. Here is the family waiting for you. Here is the job environment waiting for you. The nations are waiting for you. All right. So he creates the environment, then puts man in place. And I want every one of us to let this settle in our heart. There is something waiting for you. There are places that will not kick in full gear if you don't step up. Our families will not take on their role if we don't step up. Our wives will not become all they have to be if we don't step up. Our children will not come into full manifestation if we don't step up. Once we are in place, we'll begin to recognize that, hey, things are falling in their right places. So I and you cannot afford to lose our place. No matter how difficult it may look, no matter how challenging it may be, we cannot afford to forget that I have a place to fill. I have a place to change the dynamics of the environment. Now, when he said in verse 5 that there was no man to work the ground, that word work has to do with serve. All right? So anytime you serve an environment, you bring it into its fullness. So for example, we take our cars to the shop to get them serviced. When a car is serviced, it's giving the opportunity to work at its maximum. So when I come into an environment and I serve the environment, what I'm doing is that I'm releasing the environment into its fullness. So if I come into your life and I serve you, what I am doing invariably is releasing you into your fullness. So we as men ought to get into our environment and begin to work the environment, begin to serve the environment. That also means to when you till the environment, you allow the environment to change where it was to where it needs to be. All right. So when I serve you, I don't leave you the same way. When I serve my children, I serve them into their greatness. When I serve the local assembly, I serve it into its greatness. When I serve in politics, I serve the community that I'm supposed to lead them into where they've been called. So I want to call every one of us as men to begin to look at where God is placing us. It has nothing to do with how the environment looks like. It has to do with where you are taking the environment. Remember, he planted him in the garden and he was supposed to raise the level of the garden. All right? You come into an environment where the environment doesn't have much to offer. By the mere fact that you're around, God expects the environment to improve. All right? So we need to come to a place of understanding that God can input enough in us to change our environment. A lot of times we men cry because we didn't have anyone to help us. But I believe that God is our number one help. And if we begin to follow his patterns, if we begin to follow what was going on in his mind, we begin to realize that there is more put in us than we think.